you. Hopefully the mic works. Great. Jill, that was clutch with the batteries for the microphone. Like she said, my name is Eric Vaughn-Flam. Today I am the head of the Intellectual Property Department at Cooper Levinson. That's a national law firm with offices in 5 cities around the country. Intellectual property, that's actually a phrase that everybody is like, I'm not sure what that means. And when I say it, they kind of look at me like I have 3 eyes in my head. But it's pretty simple, actually. And all it means is property created by the mind, by your imagination. It's really the law of human imagination, which I kind of find fascinating about it. Now, everybody here creates intellectual property. Artists create works of copyright. Marketers create works of trademark and so on. So every one of you actually needs to know something about intellectual property. It's really important. In fact, I've really made a career out of representing people who have made mistakes because they're not aware of intellectual property and their rights in it, and have created problems for themselves. Artists create copyright, like I said. That could be anything from painting, literature, sculpture, software, film, music, anything like that. That's all in the realm of copyright. And the trick about intellectual property rights is actually to establish exclusive rights in it. Something you really need to know how to do. I usually lecture on intellectual property rights, and today they asked me specifically, don't lecture on intellectual property rights. Instead, they want me to discuss my career, my life journey, so to speak, which I've never done before. This is a little strange for me. I have really dedicated my career to representing artists in any form. A lot of high-level music artists, models, modeling agencies, you'll name it. You'll see a bunch of them today. But the reason I was always interested in representing artists and protecting their rights is because I was myself an artist. For a large part of my life, I was a painter. And one of the tips I'll give you this morning actually is how to sell your paintings. If artists have trouble selling their work, I figured out a way where I actually couldn't paint them fast enough. I was selling so many. And this is how I did it. I walked into the Waldorf Astoria hotel. It's a famous hotel in New York City. And I went to their banquet department. And I asked to speak to the banquet manager. And I asked him, what charity is here the most? Which charity has the most dinners at your hotel? And he gave me the name of a hospital in New York. And I contacted them. And I said, listen, during the cocktail hour, when nobody has anything to do, let me set up some easels with paintings and stuff, and whatever I sell, I'll give you half, right? In 2 years, I sold over 100 paintings. I couldn't paint them fast enough. Because if you think about it, people that go to these charity dinners, they're there to make donations anyway. They've got their checkbook. They love seeing the original art. They love talking to the artist. I could not sell them fast enough. And I thought I was going to do that as a career. And I realized not all my paintings, but some of the paintings were very personal to me. And I hated actually selling them. I just hated that. And so I decided not to be an artist as a career. But it was always, I was always an artist since a very early age. It was in my blood. So naturally, when I went to law school and in my practice, I've sort of gravitated towards that area. My muse was always light and form. I was fascinated by that. Everything I looked at in terms of painting boiled down to light and form. So that was really my source of inspiration. Okay, first slide. My first sort of job, I guess, in the world of the arts was as president of Cook Records. Emery Cook is actually the man who invented stereo binaural recording. He was a fascinating guy, and what a brilliant audio engineer he was. I had some people buy his label and his plant, and I became president of they had a huge audio catalog, really because his manufacturing process was like the best in the world. So I learned a little something there about the music business. And then I went to law school, and I had a partner who was himself a musician. So between me as a fine artist and my partner as a musician, naturally, we developed that specialty. My first big name client was a fellow named Peter Tosh. I'm not sure if anybody remembers him, yeah. And I took this off Google Images. You know, I had to get a picture of him smoking ganja, and his album was Legalize It. So he was actually a very early proponent of legalizing marijuana, which, you know, through efforts like that, that's actually happening today. Is that right? Okay. I've represented Meatloaf, very nice guy. I can't give you all the anecdotes today. This is like, I tried to compile my best stories, but I don't have time for that. So if you want to know why, for example, Meatloaf made no money off the Bat Out of Hell album, which is his huge album, you can ask me afterwards. I grabbed this photo off the internet. This is LaToya Jackson, one of my clients. This is a picture with Jack Gordon, her husband / manager. Plenty of stories there. Hootie and the Blowfish. This was interesting. This is our first act that, you know, was super successful. They had their first album, which was Cracked Review, had something over 17 million units sold. It's like almost the record on debut albums. That case was, interestingly enough, a management dispute, and they had an ex-manager, sort of, who was suing them for like 70 million bucks, and it's the largest management dispute in history. Of course, we settled that. It's confidential, so I can't tell you, but we settled it well. Yeah, you might know Madonna. Her first hit song was Holiday. And Mary Blige had done a soundtrack for Barbershop 2 movie, included a song called Not Today. And very interesting, I was suing Blige and Dre and Puff Daddy and everybody else because of that. And it's very interesting. The only part of the song that she copied was the hook. I promised my wife I wouldn't sing the hook for you, but I think I have to, just so you know. So Madonna's song is, you know, Holiday, you all remember that, right? And in Blige's song, it was Not Today, like that. And of course, the hook is a very important part of the song. But the trouble in that case was the songs were otherwise incredibly different. And these are very expensive lawsuits to bring. You need musicologists, experts. It's like, you know, there's a technical aspect of it, but there's also just sort of a layperson interpretation of the song. And, you know, and I want to do a good job for Madonna. And I really, you know, we're litigating this for years at tremendous cost. And I'm realizing, oh my God, I'm going to get killed at trial, because when the jury hears the two songs, they're going to think they're completely different without, you know, sort of appreciating the importance of the hook. And then, as a miracle, we discovered that Mary Blige had done a ringtone license for Not Today. And if you don't know what a ringtone license is, years ago, kids used to pay for music, little like a 10-second snippet of a song, as the ringer on their cell phone, right? That's a ringtone license. And the 10 seconds that, of course, Blige selected was the "Not Today," right, aspect of her song, which completely undermined her defense, and that's another case that we settled well with another wink. That was the only time, actually, that a ringtone license was used as a sound infringement basis. Wu-Tang Clan. You might not think it by the way I'm dressed, but I'm credited with discovering the Wu-Tang Clan. I can't really take all the credit. It was a producer, client of mine, a fellow named Ross Rhoda, brought the Wu-Tang Clan in, and they were nobody when we took them in. And it's another example of what happens in the entertainment business when you become successful. At that point, sort of money just rains down on you for the rest of your life. It's what everybody's hoping to sign. One of my favorite stories about the Wu-Tang Clan, I hope I have enough time, is my partner had done their renegotiation. And that's part of negotiating their contracts with the record companies, where they loosen up a lot of money. And the Klan used to come to our offices in posses of like a dozen people, sometimes with guns. So there was this scene in the conference room where the renegotiation contract was like 500 pages long, one of the most complex agreements of any kind. And he's sitting there with like this 500-page contract, and like the Wu-Tang Clans are sort of assembled in front of him, and he goes, "This shit is fat." That's all he said. "This shit is fat." And they go like, "Shit's fat?" He goes, "He signed." I'll never forget that. I've represented modeling agencies in the city, including Metropolitan Model Management, one of the top agencies in the world. And I included a photo of Claudia Schiffer, one of the top models in the world, which they had at the time I represented them. The New York Improv. I was actually a partner in the New York Improv. Also another great story. I probably don't have time to go into it now. But it was sort of like the War of the Roses between Silver Friedman, who actually started the Improv in New York, and her husband, Bud Friedman, who opened one in the West Coast. Penthouse Magazine. I actually represented General Media, and my Bob Guccione stories is one of my best stories. Ask me about the Bob Guccione story afterwards, but it was wonderful knowing him. By the way, Bob Guccione, if you don't know, was himself a fine artist and painter his whole life. I think that was his first love, and he was very dedicated to painting, and his paintings were interesting, and I enjoyed talking to him about that. Wild Style. This is, I represented an artist by the name of Michael Tracy, who was actually the very first graffiti artist who did the interlocking letters like you see here. In fact, he named his style of graffiti art Wild Style. He was my first copyright trial, and so we won, and he turns to me in the courtroom and says, they could have bought a Picasso cheaper. So that was good. This is, I took this slide from my presentation on IP. I represented fashion photographers as well. Bill Diodato was a very famous fashion photographer, and he did something incredibly innovative in the picture on the left. He was actually doing a fashion photo, and typically fashion photos are very glitzy and glamorous and high-end, but he did a photo really to sell shoes and handbags. But his photo was a model like in a public toilet stall, and you could just see that under the door of the stall. It was pretty groundbreaking at the time. Kate Spade hired somebody to copy him, and I think what I have written here is example of bad faith and willfulness. That's because Kate Spade specifically hired somebody to copy his photo. Actually, it's funny, the lower court opinion, the trial court, found there was no infringement. And Most IP lawyers think that was the result in that case, but we actually, when I filed a brief on appeal, because it was a terrible decision, they settled the case on the spot. So it's not recorded anywhere that we won, but we actually did. So you're the only people in the world that know that the Kate Spade case was actually a win for the photographer. I represented a photographer against the New York Times, a very important copyright case. You know, this was the time, you know, in sort of 2004 to 2008, when the internet was growing. Everybody threw stuff on the internet without any rights to do it. It was like the Wild West back then. I also represented a lot of sort of big Fortune 500 type companies in their sort of counterfeit seizures. This is where people like, you know, sort of manufacture stuff. The one on the right that's the real Disney merchandise, and the one on the left is somebody copied it, that's so to speak. The way we did that was we have investigators buy this stuff and compile all the evidence. Then we'd sue like 500 companies at the same time to enforce their rights. I was also general counsel to the International Advertising Association and SPAR, which was the Society for Photographers and Artist Representatives, and a number of trade organizations like that. Yeah, this slide I took from my presentation because I just think it's funny mostly. In this case, the principal defense brought by the defendant was people should know the difference between their face and their butt. Like, I'm not kidding, that was their defense. Didn't work well for them. This is the bike rack, actually, at Jupiter Beach. It is actually the subject of what was a very important copyright case, because they wanted to register that as a sculpture, basically. And the Copyright Office said, no, can't do it. And that's because, if you take my seminar, you'd know that any utilitarian use of any of this is not the subject of copyright. Got to have a photo of a smiling monkey, I think, in any presentation to make it worthwhile. This always makes me laugh when I see this picture. This actually is a very important sort of copyright case. This was the first monkey selfie. And the interesting thing about this case and basic copyright law is the person who creates the work is the author and owns it. Well, the monkey took the photo. So this became a very valuable photograph as the first monkey photo. And then a bunch of lawyers were like, wait a second, the monkey owns the rights to the photo. And that generated a whole bunch of lawsuits. Even the Copyright Office had tried to change their rules to say that copyright property can only be made by humans. But the problem with that is they changed those rules after this photograph was taken, so that's still being litigated today. The monkey selfie. This is a case that's ongoing, Westminster Choir College. That's actually the most famous choir college in the world, in Princeton, New Jersey. And Ryder tried to dismantle them and sell them and so on, so we got together and prevented that. Oh, Tao Mu. This is an ongoing case too. He is the top tennis player in China in his age category, actually. And he got involved in a terrible management agreement, which he sort of hired me to try to get him out of, which we're doing. And he actually found me because of the Hootie and the Blowfish case, because that was a management dispute. I put this for comic relief. This is me making a vicious net shot here. I should really change that slide. But it's one of the things I love about Florida, actually. Moving down here, I was a pretty good tennis player as a young man, and then hadn't played for 30 years. And I moved down here, and I discovered you can actually do that here. I play like 4 or 5 times a week now, and it's like early in the morning, and I don't miss any time at work, and it's like a great lifestyle down here. It's one of the reasons I love this place. This is another reason why I love this place, is every morning I try to see the sunrise, because it's really inspirational in a way. And I never used to like to get up early, only when I sort of had to. I hated it, but I can do that now, and it's actually a great source of inspiration. So that's it. That's me. If you have a camera on your phone, take a picture. That's my contact information. If you have any questions or concerns, I have really devoted my professional career to representing artists. Having been one myself, I relate to them. I know what it's all about, and I certainly know all the mistakes you make. So if you have any problems, feel free to call me. That's me. Thank you.